Paul, there are so many factors at play in this year's fall forecast. What impacts will they have? And can you talk about those?
Yeah, there's several actually factors that are going to go into this forecast. So we've been putting this together for the last couple of months. I think the main one is, first of all, we got to look at the tropics. Everything's still wide open here along the Gulf Coast and the Southeast Coast for a possible hit going into the fall season. So that's going to be a focus point. We've had a lot of moisture already this summer across the Tennessee Valley, the Mississippi Valley, and some of that moisture could get into there. And that moisture could be sticking around into the early fall, and it can have an effect on our nighttime lows, so we can see some warm nights out of that. Another big factor is the northern Pacific Ocean water temperature anomalies. I think there's going to be a very strong and active jet stream farther displaced to the north, which would bring more moisture into Canada and the Northwest, keeping things drier for much of the western part of the United States, so you can see warmer than average temperatures as well. I think that's going to be a big factor. And then the dip. How big is the dip as you get farther east to when the cool downs will come that we normally see in the fall season?
All right, so the map that you're seeing on your screen now is representing our transition to fall. Of course, you know, meteorological fall begins in September, September 1st, and then, you know, the actual start of the season later. But what can you tell us when it comes to the weather feeling a bit more like fall?
Yeah, and we just talked about how it could be warmer than average in the western U.S., and I think the transition from places like Nevada, California, Utah is going to be a lot slower going into that fall season feeling across those areas. But the dip that takes place over the upper Midwest and northern plain states, that could be starting up a little bit earlier than normal, maybe about a week or two. We could start seeing snow in places like Bismarck that average around October 26th. They could see some snow, maybe possibly as early as mid to late October. So I do think that area of the country will see an early start to the fall, maybe even winter season.
It's crazy we talk about snow. We'll break that down a little bit more, but let's talk about temperatures. I think a lot of us, you know, when it goes back to school or even thinking Halloween, there's been some times that we've had very warm, other times there's been snow.
Yeah, here you look at this map, and again, more of the focus of the warmth is in the western U.S. If you look back at last year, we tied 2016 for the warmest fall season on record. Most of the country should be above average coming up here, but these ups and downs will keep you at bay here, maybe in Chicago, Minneapolis. The front side's warmer probably than the back side in this area. And the eastern U.S., we're seeing some drier conditions across eastern Canada and the Northeast. I think that will have an impact on your temperatures, especially going to September. It could be a warm and at times humid periods expected across New England and parts of the Mid-Atlantic.
We often talk about the secondary peak of severe weather being in the fall. What is the long-range team looking at for severe weather risks?
Yeah, it's not out of the picture yet. I think the tornado outlook may be up and down, maybe lower than we've seen in the last couple of falls, but I do feel that we still can get wind damage and hail amounts that take place. There's going to be a stronger contrast that sets up from the warm, humid conditions that set up in the southeast, the Tennessee Valley and the Mississippi Valley, to those cool downs we talked about earlier coming into the northern plains and upper Midwest. Watch October. I think that could be the month that we see more action going on, even farther north in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, possibly seeing a couple of big events during that time period.
That's helpful updates for people. And I think when we look back of this summer, the word everyone's going to remember is flooding. Yeah. So important to focus on what spots could be in the risk zone for flooding this fall season.
Yeah, and you go into the fall season because of what we've seen so far in the summer and the late spring. There's areas that are just vulnerable, okay? It's not going to take much to cause flooding. And that area is like the Tennessee Valley, the Central Appalachians, and even along the Gulf Coast being enhanced by any tropical activity that could come into this region. We're still watching here in August that's getting a little busy, right? You just talked about that a little while ago. We could see enhanced flooding precipitation across the Gulf Coast and the Southeast as well.
And Paul, let's end on a positive note. Although I'm not a snow lover, I'm speaking for everybody else who is. Who could see some of the first snow this fall season?
Well, I'm looking, you know, it's always the mountains of the Northwest, the interior Northwest. Yes, they see it a little bit earlier, late September, early October. That's about normal, though, okay? That's about average. It's farther across the northern plains, upper Midwest, they may see it about a week or two earlier than average. Like I said earlier, Bismarck averages around October 26th. They could see it maybe a week or two earlier, maybe their first measurable snowfall. The Northeast as well on average, but still, again, you're going to see warm and humid conditions in September. And then you go to this transition in the last part of the fall season, it's a big flip. And I think that's what we're going to see is a big transition in the Northeast coming up this fall.
AccuWeather lead long-range expert Paul Pastelok, we thank you so much for your expertise and looking forward to fall.